In this video, we're going to be showing you how to build all of the general storage areas in your van.
Many people decide to frame these all out using chunky batons. However, for the most part, we're going to skip this step and just use plywood. This will allow us to save on as much space as possible, so we're going to go with 15mm plywood for the majority of this build. However, if you do have a bigger van, you can absolutely frame out all your storage areas first and then just clad it afterwards.
So your first step is to work out roughly what it is you're trying to store in the van, and that way you can work out the spaces you need to put the things in. The majority of the space in our van is going to be allocated to smaller items like kitchen utensils, books and food, but we do have some larger items that we need to find places for as well.
So with that in mind, we decided to use the space above the wheel arch as a floor-to-ceiling storage unit for all of those small to medium-sized items. This is also where we're going to mount our main dining table.
Our plan is to use the space behind the driver's seat for our small camper van fridge, and then the space in between is going to be for bedding and clothing and other slightly larger items.
So first off, we needed to box in that wheel well, but rather than just box it in and leave it there, we wanted to take advantage of this fairly unused space. So we decided to use the front of it to store our table so that we could take our table in and out and have it set up nice and easily. So we cut a front panel with a small relief to allow us to go in and grab that table.
For this size van, many people choose to go for a fold-down table, but that would mean that every time we need to access something in the cupboards at the top, we'd have to bring the table down, which would be a bit of a pain. Instead, we've come up with our own design, which means we can fold the table in half and then tuck it away in its own little storage compartment. We even lined the bottom of this small space with a thin strip of foam, so when you drop the table in, it doesn't risk getting damaged.
We then made a top for this, and as nothing is square in a van, we used the old washer trick to scribe the curve of the van wall onto the back of the plywood.
We trimmed the front edge nice and straight with our track saw, and then we secured this in place and went on to making the side pieces for this unit. These side pieces are a little bit of an awkward shape, especially because of the curved wall of the van, but if you want to see how we templated it, check out episode 2 as we did exactly the same process for the floor.
Once we're happy with the shape, we cut out those side panels using our jigsaw. However, before we fixed it all in place, we realised that the spaces either side of the wheel well were actually going to be going to waste. Of course, we're not going to let that happen on our watch, so we cut out 2 openings in the top, which would allow us access to either side of the wheel well.
Above this section, we wanted to make a couple of cupboards that we can use for things like toiletries and clothes. So we cut 3 bits of plywood to shape to act as the centre divider, the front panel and the top. We then took that front panel away so that we could cut the openings for the cupboard, and we gave everything a quick round over using our trim router.
Once we were happy with everything, we fixed it all in place with Sikaflex and screws. You may prefer to just use screws for now in case you want to make any adjustments later on. However, we are feeling pretty confident, so we're happy to crack on.
Next, it was time to make the table. For this, we used 18mm birch ply as we wanted to make it really sturdy. In order to put the table in its place ready for use, our idea would be to take it out of the storage compartment, unfold it, slot it into a perfectly 18mm size slot, and then that would hold it just using friction nice and sturdy in place.
After rounding the outer corners as well as the edges, we went about adding the hinges. These are 45mm hidden cabinet hinges and are exactly what we're after. This is how they work on a couple of pieces of scrap plywood, and as you can see, they're able to open up to a full 180 degrees while remaining completely concealed.
decided to go with 4 sets of these hinges, as that would technically be able to support 20 kilograms when unsupported, but when that table is locked in between those 2 pieces of wood, it should be absolutely rock solid. We made a quick little card template, as this would help show us where the 2 different depths that we needed would be, and then we got to routing. This was a little bit tricky, but we just took our time and went slowly, test fit regularly, and then when we were confident with the fit, we screwed them in place.
This worked beautifully, but the only thing that we hadn't considered was an easy way to get the table back out of storage, but we figured we could worry about that later on. For the time being, we just fixed some side rails in place so that the table would stay nice and aligned, and then put the top piece in place as well.
We then used our Geos sander to make sure this table was absolutely beautifully smooth before applying a couple of coats of wax. This allowed it to slot into that groove nice and smoothly, but the friction fit was still enough to keep it feeling really secure.
Next, we wanted to work on the top half of the unit, which is where we'd store all of those smaller items. So we designed how we wanted all of our small little cubbies to be laid out, and then used this to determine how high our bookshelf could be. After realising that Matt was completely incapable of just standing a couple of books up, we went about cutting out all of those cubbies.
To match the look of the rest of the unit, we used a large Forstner bit to cut holes in the corner of each cubby, and then our track saw to connect these all together. We used our portable spindle sander and our router on each one to finish them off, and then we fixed it in place.
But aside from a few little finishing touches we're going to come back to at the end, that was the floor to ceiling unit complete. Next, we wanted to make a space to store our little refrigerator cool box.
Since this unit was a completely separate piece, we built it as a standalone piece and then brought it back to the van to slide it in place. We decided to mount the fridge on some extending drawer runners, as this would allow us to open the cool box without having to physically take the whole thing out of the unit just to grab some milk. We even splashed out and got some nice push to open runners, which makes it feel nice and premium. And we also put some vents into the box to make sure the fridge had decent airflow.
We wanted the top of this unit to be in line with the dining table, meaning we had a bit of spare space at the top just above the cool box that we didn't know what to do with. So we thought we'd use the space for a little drawer to use for things like cutlery. You can also see a little section on the left hand side that's sticking out. This is not an accident, this is actually going to be used to store a secondary table, but we'll show you about that later on.
After that, we went on to build the larger storage space, which is in between the 2 units we've done so far. This is essentially a single panel with a door on the top half, which means that this could still be accessed even when the bed was opened up into a double. We did deliberate on whether we should split this up into 2 smaller storage units, but we thought the bigger space was great for things like blankets, duvets and pillows.
We used our pocket hole jig to drill all of the fixing points for this panel, as well as routed out a little section which would be used to secure the door in place with some little thumb turn locks. We then screwed it in place and added our little locking mechanism, which was made out of an offcut of walnut.
Next up, it was time to make the worktop for this whole section, and since we wanted it to match the table that we made earlier, we used the same 18mm birch ply. After cutting this out with the jigsaw and sanding the curved sections with our portable spindle sander again, we screwed this down in place. And to make sure we couldn't see any visible screws from the top surface, we screwed up from underneath using the supports.
So as we mentioned, that little bit that stuck out from behind the fridge storage is being used to secure our second table in place. We decided to go with the Lagoon table mount, which are awesome for van builds because they're made brilliantly and they're super versatile. It comes in 3 separate sections, all of which can be loosened off and move around to wherever you want it to go.
So we cut another piece of our 18mm birch ply for our tabletop and mounted it in place using screws. Pairing this adjustable tabletop with our swivelling passenger seats in the van means that we've got this really lovely little office space to work from inside.
And as if we meant to do it, the table can actually slide down and lock in place in between the storage unit and the driver's chair. So it acts as a sort of worktop extension, as well as we know that it's not going to move anywhere when we're driving around. But if we did want to take it off, it's super easy to remove by spinning one of those handles and then slotting it down in that gap just behind the driver's seat.
So that's pretty much the whole of this section done. There were just a couple of finishing touches we needed to do before we called this complete. First, we went back and attached some doors to those lower cupboards, as well as a little thumb twisty lock thing to keep them in place.
Also, we used a little bit of seatbelt material that we found in our workshop to make a super simple but extremely functional system to remove the table out of storage. Then finally we made a little topper for the section just to close it off and act as a kind of mantelpiece. This just had a couple of dowels underneath to keep it secured in place. And there you go, all finished.
It's definitely a lengthy process getting everything laid out and deciding where you want to put everything, but it's been the most satisfying part of the build and our favourite so far. It's just so functional now.
We will be finishing and carpeting all of the little storage sections we've made, but we're going to save that for the final episode where we show you all of the finishing touches.
In the next episode, we're going to be showing you how we use the back of the van to make an outdoor kitchen area.
Exciting stuff. Be sure to check out the full van series on Triton's YouTube channel and subscribe if you haven't already.
Until next time.